And I had a girlfriend who I eventually ended up marrying some many, many years later. And I'm a very jealous person. And we walked into this pub, and a guy was there, and he greeted her effusively and gave her a cuddle and a kiss. And I'm sort of standing there. He hasn't even acknowledged my existence at this point in time. So I waited till there was a lull in their conversation, and I stepped forward and I gave him a kiss. And I behaved effusively like he was doing with Danielle, because why can't I join in?
They spent almost a decade married, raised 2 sons together, and for years afterward, stayed close enough that people still ask the same question. What really happened between Russell Crowe and Danielle Spencer? The official story was short, but the real one took over a decade to fully come out. And here's the strange part. Even now, the two of them don't fully agree on it. Long before Gladiator, before the Oscar, before the tabloids ever cared, Russell Crowe was just a working actor on a small Australian film called The Crossing. It was 1989. His co-star was a young singer and actress named Danielle Spencer. Nothing happened right away, and this is the part most people don't know. It became an on and off connection that stretched across more than a decade, long before either of them was famous enough for anyone to care. By the time they finally married in April 2003, everything had changed. The wedding took place in a small chapel on Crowe's own farm in Nana Glen, New South Wales, a quiet, private ceremony, worlds away from the red carpets he now walked constantly. Their first son, Charles, arrived just months later. Their second son, Tennyson, followed in 2006. On paper, it looked settled. But here's where things get complicated. 3 years before the wedding, Gladiator had turned Crowe into one of the biggest stars on the planet. Offers didn't just increase, they multiplied. And what happened next changed everything about the marriage before it had even really begun.
For you and Russell, I genuinely would say it's been one of the most convincing and public and really inspiring cases of a couple who have co-parented and spoken about, as I say, each other with absolute warmth and affection.
I don't want to make out that the whole thing was, it's all just been lovely and everything's fine. There were days and moments where obviously things were not fine, were tense, we were unhappy, and
Studios wanted him everywhere at once, and for most of the 2000s, everywhere at once is roughly where he was. What the public saw was the work, the films, the premieres, the awards attention. What Danielle saw was something else entirely. She saw a husband who was gone for months at a stretch, coming home for days at a time between productions that could keep him overseas for half a year. And the fame came with another cost, one that would follow Crowe for the rest of his career. His temper became public property. Confrontations with photographers turned into headlines of their own. But the moment that really stuck, the one people still bring up decades later, came in 2005. An altercation at a New York hotel over a malfunctioning phone call to Danielle ended with Crowe facing criminal charges. Think about that for a second. An incident that started as an argument about staying connected to his wife turned into one of the most talked about scandals of his career. For years, though, the marriage held. And this is the part nobody talks about. Crowe has said publicly that during the stretches he did get with his sons, that time became, in his own words, the best part of his year, which says as much about how rare it was as anything else. Danielle, meanwhile, made a quiet decision of her own, one that would end up defining everything that came after. Rather than dragging young children across film sets and rented houses on different continents, she settled the family in Sydney, choosing routine over constant movement. She said that once their eldest started school, the moving around had started to feel unsettling for him, and that stability mattered more to her than staying physically close to Russell at all times. That single choice, stay put in Sydney or keep following him around the world, became, in hindsight, the real fault line in the marriage. Not a scandal, not a single blow-up, something much slower and much harder to see coming. By October 2012, after 9 years of marriage, it was over.
it's sad. It's really sad breaking up with somebody that, you know, you've known for so long, that you've had children with. Me kind of breaking up the family, and it felt very much like I was driving that. So I had to deal with my almost sense of guilt that I was fracturing the family, but obviously I did it.
The announcement was calm and almost businesslike. A report out of Australia describing an amicable separation, the boys remaining in Sydney with Danielle while Crowe continued working, at the time on the biblical epic Noah. No public fighting, no messy statements, just an ending that looked, from the outside, remarkably tidy for two people who'd spent 9 years being chased by cameras.
So I just want to clear that up and say we were not perfect, and we're still not. And to me it just seemed it would just be ridiculous to end up completely estranged or enemies after that kind of connection and having 2 children together.
For a long time, that tidiness was mistaken for the whole story. But here's where it gets interesting. Reports at the time pointed to the obvious explanation: a punishing travel schedule, a husband perpetually somewhere else. And for years, even Crowe himself seemed to confirm it. In one interview, discussing the split candidly, he said plainly that his career, the constant travel it demanded, was one of the real reasons the marriage ended. That was the accepted version for more than a decade. Then Danielle Spencer complicated it. And this is the moment that rewrote the entire story. In a recent interview with the Sydney Morning Herald, she pushed back directly on the narrative that had followed her for 14 years. The idea that Russell's rising career and his time away broke the marriage, she said, simply wasn't true for her. She didn't need her partner beside her every hour of every day to feel secure. And she made a point of praising his loyalty, not blaming his absence. Stop and think about what that means. The man says one thing publicly. The woman who actually lived it says another. And neither one is calling the other a liar. That's what makes this different from every other Hollywood breakup story. It suggests something messier and more human than any single headline could capture. That 2 people inside the same marriage can walk away with 2 different explanations for why it ended, and both of them can be telling the truth as they experienced it. But Danielle had her own truth, and it wasn't the one people expected. What she's been far more open about isn't blame aimed at Russell. It's guilt aimed at herself. On the podcast, Something to Talk About, she admitted something most people never saw coming. She was the one who effectively drove the decision to separate. She described the ache of ending things with someone she'd known that long, someone she'd had children with, and the heavy, almost disorienting guilt of feeling like she was the one fracturing the family. She was careful to add that she wouldn't have done it if she hadn't believed it needed to happen. But the guilt, she made clear, never fully left. That's the part that never made the tabloid headlines back in 2012. Not a cheating scandal, not a fight caught on camera. Just a woman quietly deciding, after years of distance dressed up as normal life, that the marriage had to end, and carrying the weight of that decision long after the divorce was finalized in 2018. And then came the moment that made the ending impossible to ignore. In 2015, with the divorce still working its way through, Crowe put 200 personal items up for sale through Sotheby's Australia. Movie memorabilia, furniture, clothing, art collected over 9 years of marriage. He called it, with typical bluntness, the art of divorce. Among the items, an 1890 violin he'd played in Master and Commander, expected to sell for over $100,000. It was less a fire sale than a public full stop. Crowe closing a chapter, the only way he knew how, in front of everyone. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. What makes this story different from most Hollywood breakups isn't the ending. It's what came after. Russell and Danielle didn't disappear from each other's lives. They kept raising Charles and Tennyson together, mostly out of Sydney, with Crowe making the trip whenever filming allowed, and the family still gathering for a holiday together most years. In 2020, Danielle told Stellar magazine something that surprised a lot of people who assumed the worst. The marriage had ended, but the friendship never did. She still considered him family. And years later, Crowe would appear on Australian radio and, when pressed, admit with visible reluctance that he'd once dressed up in character from one of his films just for her, back when they were still married. A small, almost embarrassed piece of affection surfacing more than a decade after the divorce. So what actually broke Russell Crowe and Danielle Spencer's marriage? Here's the honest answer. And it's not what the headlines told you. There isn't one clean cause. There's a career that exploded faster than any relationship could easily absorb. There's a woman who chose stability for her children over chasing her husband around the world. There's a man who has openly admitted his job pulled him away too often. And an ex-wife who, years later, refused to let that be the whole explanation. There's guilt that outlasted the marriage itself, and a friendship that outlasted the guilt. Maybe that's the real truth behind their story. Not a scandal, not a villain. Just two people who loved each other, built a life that fame made almost impossible to sustain, and, instead of tearing each other apart when it ended, chose, quietly, to keep showing up for their sons. What do you think really pulled them apart? The distance, or something neither of them has said out loud yet? Let us know in the comments, and if you want the next hidden Hollywood story, the next video is right there on your screen.
Do you know Danielle Spencer was? Oh, Russell Crowe's ex, right? That's right. Do you know, I never understood that. He could have married a model. I always thought he should have stayed with Meg Ryan. Who told her she can sing? Do you know, I swear on my life, I've never seen a bitch smile. Got a face like a smacked ass.